My parents threatened to disown my disabled sister if I didn't marry my best friend and seal a business merger. So my dad runs this manufacturing company that's been in our family for like 30 years, makes industrial parts or whatever. Last year, things got rough and he needed to merge with another company to stay afloat. The other company is owned by Jordan's parents. Jordan's been my best friend since we were 7. We met at summer camp and just clicked. Here's the thing about my sister Vanessa. She's 23 and has cerebral palsy. She uses a wheelchair and needs help with a lot of daily stuff. My parents pay for her care, her medical equipment, her therapists. Insurance covers some, but not all of it. She lives in a group home that costs about $4,000 a month. 2 months ago, my dad called me into his office at home. Mom was there too. They had this weird, serious look on their faces. Dad said the merger was falling through. Jordan's parents wanted a family connection to make it work. They suggested Jordan and I get married. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud because I thought he was joking. Jordan and I are just friends. We've never been romantic. Not once. We've seen each other throw up at parties and cry over dumb stuff. There's nothing there like that. Dad didn't laugh. He said if the merger doesn't happen, the company goes under. They'd lose everything. Then Mom dropped the bomb. She said if I didn't do this, they couldn't afford Vanessa's care anymore. They'd have to pull her out of the group home. She'd have to figure it out on her own. I just stared at them. I asked if they were seriously threatening to abandon Vanessa. Dad said it wasn't a threat. It was reality. No company means no money means no care. Simple as that. I told them that was insane. Mom said I was being selfish. That Vanessa's whole life depended on this family staying stable. That I was the only one who could fix it because Jordan's parents specifically wanted me. Apparently they always liked me and thought I'd be a good match for their son. I left that night and went straight to Jordan's apartment. I told him everything. He already knew. His parents had told him the same thing 2 days before. He looked miserable. We sat on his couch eating leftover pizza and trying to figure out what to do. Jordan said we could just do it. Get married on paper. Not change anything about our lives. We could live separately and just tell everyone we were married. It would be fake. I said that was crazy. He said my parents threatening Vanessa was crazy. He had a point. We spent 3 weeks going back and forth. I visited Vanessa at her group home. She was happy there. She had friends and activities and nurses who actually cared about her. The thought of her losing that because I wouldn't sign some papers made me sick. But the thought of marrying my best friend to save my dad's company made me just as sick. Last week, my parents invited me to dinner. They had paperwork ready. Merger documents. A prenup. They'd planned the whole thing out. There was even a date set for the wedding. 2 months from now. Small ceremony. I looked at my dad and asked him if he ever felt bad about this. He said business was business. That Vanessa's care wasn't cheap and somebody had to pay for it. That I should be grateful they gave me options instead of just cutting her off. Options. Like this was some kind of gift. Jordan texted me yesterday. His parents were asking if I'd made a decision. They needed to know by Friday. That's tomorrow. The merger paperwork has a deadline, and after that, the other company walks away. I'm sitting here now, staring at my phone. Vanessa sent me a photo from art class at the group home. She's smiling. She has no idea what's happening. Jordan just texted again. He said whatever I decide, he'll back me up. That we're best friends no matter what. My dad called an hour ago. He didn't say anything about Vanessa. He just said I had until 5 p.m. tomorrow to give him an answer, or he's pulling the merger off for himself. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, looking at bank statements and care facility costs and state assistance programs, trying to find some way out of this that didn't involve me signing my life away. The numbers didn't add up. Vanessa's group home was private and expensive. The state facilities had wait lists 2 years long. Even if she got in somewhere, the quality of care was terrible. I'd visited one once with my mom when we were touring options. It smelled like bleach and sadness. The staff looked exhausted. Residents sat in hallways, staring at nothing. At 4 in the morning, I called my Aunt Linda, my mom's sister. She lived in Oregon and we didn't talk much, but she'd always been good to Vanessa. Sent her birthday cards with $20 bills inside. Called on holidays. She answered on the 5th ring. Her voice was scratchy with sleep. I told her everything. The merger. The ultimatum. Jordan. All of it. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said my parents were out of their minds. That what they were doing was emotional blackmail. That I shouldn't marry anyone I didn't want to marry. I asked if she could help with Vanessa's care. She sighed. She said she was barely making her own mortgage payment. Her husband had been laid off 6 months ago. She had nothing to give. I thanked her anyway and hung up. I put my head down on the table and just sat there. At 7 a.m., I texted Jordan. Asked if we could meet for breakfast. He replied immediately. Said he'd been up all night too. We met at this diner near his apartment. The kind with red vinyl booths and waitresses who called everyone honey. Jordan looked like hell. Dark circles under his eyes. Hair sticking up in the back. He ordered coffee. I ordered the same. Neither of us touched the menus. He said his parents had called him at midnight. Asked if he'd talk to me. Told him the deadline was real and they needed this merger to happen. His mom had actually cried on the phone. Said they'd lose the house if the company went under. I hadn't known that. Jordan's family had always seemed fine. Not rich, but comfortable. His dad drove a nice car. They took vacations. Jordan said they'd remortgaged everything to keep the business running. They were drowning in debt. The merger was their only lifeline. So it wasn't just my family. It was his too. The waitress came back and we ordered food we didn't want. Eggs and toast. Something to justify taking up the booth. Jordan said we should just do it. Sign the papers, get married, keep living our separate lives. Nobody had to know it was fake except us. I said it felt wrong, like we were lying to everyone. He said our parents were the ones lying, using us like chess pieces. At least if we did this on our own terms, we'd have some control. I picked at my eggs. They were cold. I hadn't noticed the waitress bring them. Jordan reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Not romantic, just desperate. He said Vanessa needed me to say yes, that he knew I loved my sister more than anything, that this was the only way to keep her safe. I pulled my hand back, told him I needed more time. He said we didn't have time. It was Thursday morning. The deadline was 5 p.m. I left $20 on the table and walked out. Jordan didn't follow me. I drove to Vanessa's group home. It was 40 minutes outside the city in this quiet neighborhood with trees and sidewalks. The building was nice, brick with big windows, ramps everywhere. A garden in the back? I signed in at the front desk. The receptionist knew me. She smiled and buzzed me through. Vanessa was in the common room watching TV with 3 other residents. She saw me and her whole face lit up. She wheeled over fast, almost ran into a coffee table. She asked what I was doing there. I usually visited on Sundays. I said I missed her, wanted to see her. She narrowed her eyes, said I was a terrible liar, asked what was wrong. I sat down on the couch next to her chair. I didn't know what to say. How do you tell someone their entire life is being used as leverage? Vanessa grabbed my arm. Her grip was weak but insistent. She said I looked terrible, asked if I was sick. I said no, just tired. She didn't believe me. She knew me too well. One of the nurses came over, asked if everything was okay. I said yes. Vanessa waited until the nurse was gone. Then she asked me straight out. She said Mom and Dad were acting weird lately, not calling as much, being short with her on the phone. She asked if something was wrong with the company. I wanted to lie, protect her from all of it. But Vanessa wasn't a kid. She was 23. She deserved the truth. I told her. Everything. The merger. Jordan. The ultimatum. The deadline. Her face went through about 6 different emotions. Shock, anger, hurt, fear. Then she settled on something that looked like resignation. She said she'd figured something was up, that money had been tight, that Dad had stopped talking about the business when she asked. I said I was trying to figure out what to do. Vanessa looked at me hard. She said I better not marry Jordan because of her, that she wasn't going to be the reason I ruined my life. I said it wouldn't ruin my life, that Jordan and I were best friends, that it would be fine. She called me a liar again, said marriage was serious, that even if we didn't love each other now, it would get complicated, that I'd end up resenting her. I said I could never resent her. She said I would. Eventually, when I met someone I actually wanted to be with and couldn't because I was fake married to Jordan, when I wanted kids with someone who wasn't my best friend, when I looked back at my 20s and realized I'd spent them living a lie, I didn't have an answer for that. A staff member announced lunch. Vanessa said she had to go. Before she wheeled away, she grabbed my hand again. She said if Mom and Dad couldn't afford to keep her here anymore, she'd figure it out, that she wasn't helpless, that I needed to stop treating her like she was made of glass. Then she left. I sat there on the couch, watching her roll toward the dining room with her friends, laughing at something one of them said. I left without saying goodbye to anyone. Got in my car and just drove. No destination. Just driving. I ended up at Jordan's apartment building again. I didn't go up. I sat in my car in the parking lot. I called him. He answered immediately. Asked where I'd gone. I said I needed to know if he actually wanted this, the marriage, or if he was just doing it because his parents were forcing him. Jordan was quiet. Then he said he didn't want it. Not like this. But he didn't see another option. That both our families would collapse without this merger. That sometimes you had to do things you didn't want to do. I said that was a terrible reason to get married. He said yeah, it was. I asked him if he'd ever thought about us. Like that. Romantically. He laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. He said no. Never. That I was like a sister to him. That the whole thing felt wrong and weird and like some kind of arranged marriage from 100 years ago. I said that's exactly what it was. We both sat there breathing into our phones. Not talking. Finally, Jordan said we had until 5. That was 8 hours. He said we should meet at his place at 4 and decide together. One way or the other. I agreed. Hung up. It was 11 a.m. I had 5 hours to kill. I drove to my apartment. My roommate Becca was home. She worked nights as a bartender, so she was usually around during the day. She took one look at me and asked what happened. I broke down. Told her everything. She sat there on our lumpy couch listening, not interrupting. When I finished, she said my parents were monsters, that I should tell them to go to hell. I said it wasn't that simple. She said it was exactly that simple. That Vanessa was an adult. That there were programs and services. That my parents were manipulating me. I said Vanessa would end up in some state facility where she'd be miserable. Becca said maybe. Or maybe she'd figure something else out. That disabled people lived independent lives all the time. That I was acting like Vanessa couldn't survive without my parents' money and that was insulting to her. That hit me hard. Because she was right. I'd been so focused on keeping Vanessa in that group home, I hadn't considered what she actually wanted. If she'd even want me to marry Jordan to keep her there. She'd already told me she didn't want that. I'd ignored her. Becca made me tea. We sat there drinking it. She asked what I was going to do. I said I didn't know. She said I needed to figure it out fast. That 4 p.m. would come whether I was ready or not. At 3 p.m. I got a call from my mom. I didn't want to answer, but I did. She asked if I'd made a decision. Her voice was tight, anxious. I said I was still thinking. She said there was nothing to think about, that this was about family, about Vanessa, about doing the right thing. I said marrying someone I didn't love wasn't the right thing. She said love wasn't everything. That plenty of marriages started without love and worked out fine. That Jordan was a good person. That we'd be happy eventually. I said she didn't know that. She said she knew I'd regret it if Vanessa ended up in some state home being neglected. That I'd never forgive myself. That this was my chance to prevent that. I told her I had to go. She said 5 p.m. Don't forget. I hung up. My hands were shaking. Becca was watching me from the kitchen. She said I should call Vanessa, ask her what she wanted. I said I already knew what she wanted. She didn't want me to do this. Becca said then I had my answer. At 3:30, I drove to Jordan's apartment. I was early. I sat in my car for 20 minutes watching the clock. At 3:50, I went up. Jordan answered the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt. He looked as bad as I felt. We sat on his couch, the same spot where we'd had leftover pizza weeks ago, back when this was still new and shocking. Now, it just felt inevitable. Jordan said his dad had called twice that day, once at noon, once at 2, both times asking if I'd said yes yet. I said my mom had done the same. Jordan said they were relentless, that they weren't going to let this go. I said I knew. We sat there. The clock on his wall ticked. 4 p.m. came and went. Neither of us moved. At 4:15, Jordan said we needed to decide, that the deadline was in 45 minutes. I said I couldn't marry him, that it felt wrong, that Vanessa didn't want me to, that I'd spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd just said no. Jordan nodded. He said he understood, that he felt the same way, that he'd been hoping I'd be the one to say it first. I asked what we were going to tell our parents. He said the truth, that we weren't doing it, that they'd have to figure something else out. I asked what would happen to Vanessa. Jordan said he didn't know, but that it wasn't my job to sacrifice myself to fix my parents' financial problems. At 4:30, my phone rang. My dad. I answered on speaker so Jordan could hear. Dad asked if I had an answer. His voice was cold. I said yes. I wasn't doing it. Jordan and I weren't getting married. There was silence. Then my dad said I was making the biggest mistake of my life, that I was destroying this family, that Vanessa would suffer because of my selfishness. I said if Vanessa suffered, it would be because of him, because he chose business over his daughter, because he was willing to throw her away to save his company. My dad said I didn't understand how the world worked, that everything cost money, that he'd done his best for 23 years taking care of Vanessa and now he needed help and I was abandoning him. I said he was abandoning Vanessa, not me. He said I had 30 minutes to change my mind. Then he hung up. Jordan's phone rang next. His mom. He answered. She was crying, actually crying. She said they were going to lose everything. The house, the business, 40 employees would be out of work, all because Jordan and I were too selfish to help our families. Jordan said we weren't being selfish, that what they were asking was impossible, that marriage wasn't a business transaction. His mom said in their world it was, that his grandparents had an arranged marriage, that it worked out fine, that he was throwing away his family's legacy because he was scared. Jordan said he wasn't scared. He was being realistic, that marrying your best friend to save a company was insane. His mom said fine. When they lost the house, he could explain to his little brother why they had to move into an apartment. When the company folded, he could explain to 40 families why they didn't have jobs anymore. Then she hung up. We sat there, both our phones on the coffee table, neither of us touching them. Jordan said his chest hurt, like physically hurt. I said mine too. At 4:50, my phone buzzed. A text from my dad. Just numbers. Bank statements. Vanessa's care costs. The group home monthly fee. A screenshot of their checking account balance. It was low. Really low. Then another text. This is what's left. After this month, we're done. She's your responsibility now. Jordan's phone buzzed. His dad. Similar messages. Mortgage statements. Business debts. A letter from the bank about foreclosure proceedings. At 4:58, both our phones rang at the same time. My parents. His parents. We didn't answer. At 5 p.m. exactly, my phone buzzed again. A text from my mom. You've made your choice. Don't call us about Vanessa anymore. We're done. Jordan got a similar text from his dad. The merger is dead. Hope you're happy. We sat there until almost 6. Not talking. Just sitting. Finally, Jordan said he needed to be alone. I left. Drove home. Becca was at work. The apartment was quiet. I called Vanessa. She answered on the second ring. She was in her room. I could hear her TV in the background. I told her what happened. That I'd said no. That mom and dad were done helping her. She was quiet for a long time. Then, she said okay. Just okay. I asked if she was scared. She said yeah. A little. But mostly she was relieved. That she was tired of being used as a weapon against me. That she'd rather figure things out on her own than watch me destroy my life. I started crying. She told me to stop. Said it wasn't my fault. That mom and dad made their choice and so did she. I asked what she was going to do. She said she had some money saved. Not much, but enough for a few months in a cheaper place. That she'd been looking at options just in case. That she wasn't helpless even if everyone treated her like she was. She said the group home had a social worker. That she'd talk to them tomorrow. Figure out what programs she qualified for. What her options were. I said I'd help. With money. With whatever she needed. She said no. That I needed to live my life. That she'd be fine. We talked for another hour. When we hung up, I felt empty. Like I'd been scraped clean inside. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls. 12 from my mom. 5 from my dad. I didn't listen to the voicemails. There was a text from Jordan. My dad filed the merger withdrawal this morning. It's officially dead. Another text from my mom. Vanessa called crying. Said she can't afford to stay at the group home past next month. This is your fault. I blocked both my parents' numbers. I couldn't deal with them. Not yet. I called the group home. Asked to speak to Vanessa's social worker. Her name was Patricia. She was in her 50s and had been working with disabled adults for 20 years. I explained the situation. Patricia listened. When I finished, she said she'd seen this before. Families using disabled members as leverage. It was more common than people thought. She said Vanessa had already come to her that morning, that they'd spent 2 hours going over options. There was a state program that could subsidize housing. Medicaid would cover medical costs. Vanessa could apply for disability benefits. It wouldn't be the group home. The quality would be different, but Vanessa wouldn't be on the street. I asked how long the process took. Patricia said 4 to 6 weeks if we moved fast. That Vanessa could stay at the group home until the end of next month. After that, she'd need to transition. I said I'd pay for next month. Keep her there while we figured things out. Patricia said that was good, that it gave them time to find the right placement. I hung up and transferred $4,000 from my savings to the group home. It hurt. That was a third of what I had saved. But Vanessa needed it more than I did. Jordan called around noon. Said his parents weren't speaking to him. That his little brother had texted asking what happened. Jordan told him the truth. His brother said their parents were acting crazy. That he didn't blame Jordan for saying no. I asked how he was holding up. Jordan said not great. That he felt guilty even though he knew he shouldn't. That 40 people were going to lose their jobs because of us. I said it wasn't because of us. It was because our parents mismanaged their businesses and tried to use us as a bailout. Jordan said he knew that logically, but it still felt bad. We agreed to meet up later that week. Neither of us was ready yet. I spent the next 3 days in my apartment. Becca covered for me at work. Told my boss I had the flu. I didn't have the flu. I just couldn't function. On day 4, I forced myself to get up, shower, eat something. I called Vanessa. She sounded better than me. Said Patricia had found 2 potential housing options. Both were apartments in buildings with other disabled residents. Live-in aides. Accessible everything. Not as nice as the group home, but decent. Vanessa was touring them next week. She asked if I wanted to come. I said yes. I also got a call from my Aunt Linda. She'd heard about everything from my mom. My mom had called her crying, saying I'd destroyed the family. That Vanessa was going to end up homeless because of me. Linda said she'd told my mom she was delusional. That what they'd done was abusive. That I'd made the right choice. Linda said if I needed anything to call her. That she might not have money, but she had a spare room if things got bad. I thanked her. It helped knowing someone in my family wasn't insane. 2 weeks after the deadline, Jordan's parents' company officially declared bankruptcy. The merger had been their last hope. Without it, the debts crushed them. Jordan called me sobbing. Said his parents had to sell their house. That 43 employees got severance packets and pink slips. That his dad hadn't left his bedroom in 3 days. I didn't know what to say. There was nothing to say. Jordan said his parents still weren't talking to him. That his mom had told him he'd destroyed 43 families. That she'd never forgive him. I said she would eventually. That she was hurt and scared and lashing out. That it wasn't his fault. Jordan said it felt like his fault. 3 weeks after the deadline, my dad's company followed. The merger had been his lifeline too. Without it, the company couldn't stay afloat. My mom called from a number I didn't have blocked. I made the mistake of answering. She screamed at me for 10 minutes. Said I'd killed my father. That he'd worked for 30 years building that company and I destroyed it in one day. That the employees who lost their jobs had families, kids, mortgages. That their suffering was on my hands. I hung up, blocked that number too. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those 43 families. About people losing their jobs, their insurance, their stability. Because I'd said no to a fake marriage. Becca found me at 3 a.m. sitting on the kitchen floor. I was crying. She sat down next to me. She said it wasn't my fault. That the companies were already failing. That the merger might have bought them time, but it wouldn't have fixed the core problems. That I couldn't sacrifice my entire life for a temporary solution. I said it didn't feel temporary. It felt permanent. Like I'd made a choice. And now people were suffering. Becca said people were suffering because of bad business decisions. Not because of me. I wanted to believe her. Vanessa moved into her new apartment 5 weeks after the deadline. It was in a building with 12 other units. All disabled residents. There was a shared common area. A nurse on duty 24/7. Aides who helped with daily tasks. It wasn't the group home. The apartment was smaller, the building older, but Vanessa seemed okay with it. She'd made friends with her neighbor, a woman named Claire, who had MS. They watched reality TV together. Vanessa's rent was covered by the state program. Medical costs by Medicaid. She got a disability check each month that covered food and basics. It was tight, but she was managing. I visited every Sunday, brought groceries, made sure she had everything she needed. She kept telling me to stop hovering, that she was fine. But I couldn't stop. The guilt sat in my chest like a weight. Jordan and I started meeting up again around week 6. We'd get coffee or lunch, not talk about our parents, not talk about the companies, just exist as friends. One day, Jordan said his parents were moving to Florida. His dad's brother had offered them a room while they got back on their feet. His little brother was staying with friends to finish high school. Jordan's apartment lease was up in 2 months. He asked if I wanted to get a place together, as roommates. Not anything weird, just friends splitting rent. Becca was moving in with her boyfriend, so I needed a new roommate anyway. I said yes. We found a 2-bedroom in a decent neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but clean and affordable. We moved in on a Saturday. Spent the whole day carrying boxes up 3 flights of stairs. That night we ordered pizza. Sat on the floor of our empty living room. Neither of us had furniture yet. Jordan said it was weird. That 6 months ago we'd been facing down a forced marriage and now we were just roommates eating pizza on the floor. I said yeah, it was weird. He asked if I regretted saying no. I said no. Every day I was relieved I'd walked away. But I also felt guilty. About the employees. About his family losing their house. About Vanessa having to leave the group home. Jordan said he felt the same way. That logically, he knew we'd done the right thing. But it still hurt. We sat there in the dark eating cold pizza. Outside the window, the city hummed. 2 months after moving in together, I got an email from my dad. First contact since the deadline. The email was short. Said he was sorry. That he'd been wrong to threaten Vanessa. That he'd been desperate and made terrible choices. That he hoped someday I'd forgive him. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready. Jordan got a similar email from his mom. He showed it to me. It said almost the same thing. Apologies, regret, hope for forgiveness. Jordan said he didn't know what to do with it. I said me neither. We decided to wait, see if the apologies were real or just guilt talking. 3 months after the companies folded, both sets of parents tried to reconnect. My mom called from another new number, said she missed me, that she wanted to see me, that she'd been in therapy and realized what she'd done was wrong. I told her I needed more time. She said she understood, that she'd wait. Jordan's dad reached out too, asked if they could meet for coffee. Jordan said no, not yet. His dad said whenever Jordan was ready, he'd be there. Vanessa thrived in her new place. She got a part-time job doing data entry from home, started taking online classes, made plans to get a modified van so she could drive herself places. She said being independent felt good, that she'd spent her whole life having decisions made for her, that now she got to make them herself. I asked if she was mad at me for not marrying Jordan, for everything that happened after. She said no, that she was grateful, that watching me stand up to mom and dad had given her courage to stand up for herself, that she was happier now than she'd been in years. That helped. A little. 6 months after the deadline, Jordan and I were living normal lives. We worked, we hung out, we had other friends over. We argued about whose turn it was to buy toilet paper. One night we were watching TV and Jordan said he'd started dating someone, a guy he'd met at the gym, named Felix. They'd been seeing each other for a few weeks. I asked why he hadn't told me sooner. Jordan said he didn't know how I'd react, that things were still weird with everything that happened. I said things weren't weird, that I was happy for him, that he deserved to date someone he actually liked. Jordan said he'd been worried I'd feel betrayed, that he was moving on with his life while I was still dealing with guilt. I told him I was moving on too, that I'd been seeing someone from work, a woman named Tess, that we'd been on 4 dates and it was going well. Jordan looked relieved. He said good, that we both deserved to be happy. We stayed up late that night talking about Felix and Tess, about normal stuff, first date stories, embarrassing moments, plans for the future. It felt like old times, before the companies, before the merger, before everything got complicated. At the 1-year mark, my dad called. Not an email, an actual call. I almost didn't answer, but I did. He said he was living in a small apartment in Cleveland, working as a manager at a manufacturing plant. It wasn't his company, but it paid the bills. Mom was working too, at a law office, reception. He said they'd spent the year in therapy, individual and couples, working through what had happened, why they'd thought threatening Vanessa was acceptable, how they'd justified using me as a business solution. He said he couldn't take it back, couldn't undo the damage, but he wanted me to know he was sorry, that he'd been wrong, that his priorities had been twisted and he'd hurt the people he loved most. I asked about Vanessa. He said yes, that she'd agreed to have coffee with him once a month, that they were rebuilding slowly, that she'd set boundaries and he was respecting them. He asked if I'd be willing to do the same. Have coffee once a month? No pressure, no expectations, just a chance to reconnect. I said I'd think about it. He said that was all he could ask for. I talked to Vanessa about it. She said Dad had changed, that he seemed genuinely remorseful, that therapy had helped him see how toxic his thinking had been. She said I should give him a chance if I wanted to, but that I shouldn't feel obligated, that forgiveness was mine to give or withhold. I agreed to 1 coffee. Just 1. See how it went. We met at a diner halfway between our cities. Dad looked older, grayer, tired. He shook my hand, didn't try to hug me. We ordered coffee, made small talk. He told me about his job, his apartment, how Mom was doing. I told him about my job, my roommate situation with Jordan. Nothing about Tess. That felt too personal. Toward the end, Dad said he'd spent the year thinking about what he'd done, that he'd realized he'd treated Vanessa like a bargaining chip, that he'd been willing to sacrifice my happiness to save his pride, that the company had become more important than his kids. He said losing everything had been awful, but it had also been a wake-up call, that he'd built his entire identity around that business, and when it was gone, he had to figure out who he was without it. He said he was still figuring that out, but he was trying. I asked if he expected me to forgive him. He said no, that he'd understand if I never did, that he just wanted a chance to show me he'd changed. I said I'd think about it. He paid for coffee. We left. I called Vanessa on the drive home, told her about the meeting. She asked how I felt. I said I didn't know. That Dad seemed different, but that I didn't know if different was enough. Vanessa said that was fair, that I got to decide what I needed. Jordan's parents moved back from Florida after a year. They bought a small house outside the city. His dad got a job at a consulting firm. His mom started teaching business classes at a community college. They asked to see Jordan. He agreed. They met for dinner at their new house. Jordan brought Felix. His parents were polite, careful. They didn't bring up the merger, didn't mention the company, just asked about Jordan's life, his job, his relationship. Jordan said it was weird but not terrible, that they were trying, that he appreciated the effort even if things weren't back to normal. At the 2-year mark, I'd had coffee with my dad 6 times. We'd moved past surface-level talk, started discussing real things. He'd apologized multiple times. I'd started to believe him. I introduced him to Tess. She was skeptical at first. I'd told her everything, but she gave him a chance. By the end of dinner, she said he seemed genuine. Vanessa had dinner with Mom and Dad once a month now. She'd even stayed at their apartment a few times. She said they were different people, that therapy had actually worked, that they treated her like an adult now instead of a responsibility. Jordan and Felix got engaged. Small ceremony planned, just close friends and family. Jordan asked if I'd be his best man. I said yes. At the wedding, his parents were there. So were mine. Both sets were civil to each other, even friendly. They'd both been through similar collapses, similar rebuilding. It gave them common ground. My mom pulled me aside at the reception, said she was proud of me, that I'd made the right choice even when it was hard, that she was sorry she'd ever asked me to do anything different. I said thank you. It was the first time she'd acknowledged that I'd been right. Tess and I moved in together after 3 years. Got a place near Vanessa's building so I could keep visiting easily. Tess came with me most Sundays. She and Vanessa became friends. They'd gang up on me about hovering too much. Jordan and Felix bought a condo, had people over for dinner parties, started talking about adopting kids. My dad retired from the manufacturing plant, started volunteering at a community center, teaching business skills to people trying to start small companies. He said it felt good to help people instead of just chasing profit. At the 5-year mark, we all had dinner together. Both families, Jordan and Felix, me and Tess, Vanessa and her girlfriend Riley, who she'd met at a disability advocacy group, my parents, Jordan's parents. We went to this Italian place with big tables and candles. Everyone was talking and laughing, passing bread, arguing over what to order. Jordan caught my eye across the table. He raised his glass. I raised mine. We'd made it through, both of us. It had been messy and painful, and we'd both lost things. But we'd also gained things. Freedom, autonomy, real relationships built on choice instead of obligation. The businesses were gone. The money was gone. But we were still here, still friends, still choosing each other every day. And that felt like enough. Tess squeezed my hand under the table, asked if I was okay. I said yeah, because I was. For the first time in 5 years, I actually was. The guilt hadn't disappeared completely. I still thought about those 43 employees sometimes, wondered how they'd landed, if they'd found new jobs, if their families were okay. But I'd learned to carry it differently, to acknowledge it without letting it consume me, to remember that I'd made the best choice I could with the information I had. Jordan had learned the same thing. We talked about it late one night over beers on our balcony back when we were still roommates. How you couldn't save everyone. How sometimes the right choice still hurt. Life moved on. Vanessa got promoted at her data entry job. Started making enough to save a little each month. Talked about maybe moving to a bigger apartment with Riley. My dad and I had coffee once a month still. Sometimes twice. We'd rebuilt something. Not the same as before, but something new. Something based on honesty, instead of obligation. Jordan's little brother graduated high school. Got into college. Jordan helped him move into the dorms. His parents cried. Happy tears this time. At the 7-year mark, Tess and I got married. Small ceremony. Just family and close friends. Vanessa was my maid of honor. Jordan officiated. He'd gotten ordained online just for us. My dad walked me down the aisle. I'd spent months deciding if I wanted that, if I was ready. Vanessa had said it was my choice. That dad would understand either way. I decided yes. Because he'd done the work. He'd changed. He'd earned a second chance. When we reached the end of the aisle, he kissed my cheek, whispered that he was proud of me, that he loved me. I whispered back that I loved him too. It was true. Complicated, messy, but true. At the reception, Jordan gave a speech. Told everyone about how we'd been best friends since summer camp, how we'd seen each other through everything, how he was grateful I'd had the courage to say no all those years ago because now we both got to have real marriages with people we actually loved. People laughed. Tess squeezed my hand. Jordan winked at me from the microphone. After dinner, Vanessa pulled me aside. We stood on the venue's back patio looking out at the city lights. She said she'd been thinking about everything that happened, how scared she'd been when Mom and Dad threatened to stop paying for her care, how angry she'd been when they'd tried to use her against me. She said she was glad it had happened. Not the threats, not the pain, but the outcome, because it had forced her to become independent, to stop relying on parents who saw her as a burden, to build a life on her own terms. She said if I'd married Jordan, she would have felt guilty forever, that she would have spent her whole life knowing I'd sacrificed my happiness for her, that it would have poisoned everything. I said I'd thought about marrying him anyway, that I'd been so close to saying yes. Vanessa said she knew, that she'd seen it in my face that day at the group home. That's why she'd been so firm, that she'd needed me to hear that she'd rather struggle than watch me give up my life. I hugged her. She hugged back. We stood there for a while just holding each other. Riley came looking for her. Said people were asking for a toast. Vanessa rolled her eyes but went back inside. I stayed on the patio a few more minutes, breathed in the cool air, thought about everything that had led to this moment. The ultimatum, the deadline, the choice, the fallout, the rebuilding. All of it had been necessary. Even the painful parts. Especially the painful parts. Because they'd taught me something crucial. That sometimes love means saying no. That protecting someone doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. That boundaries matter even when they're hard. Tess came out to find me. Asked if I was okay. I said yeah. Just thinking. She said we should cut the cake. People were getting antsy. I laughed. Took her hand. We went back inside together. The party lasted until midnight. People danced. Ate too much cake. Took embarrassing photos. Jordan and Felix started a conga line. My dad joined in. So did Jordan's parents. Everyone was laughing. At the end of the night, Tess and I stood in the parking lot saying goodbye to everyone. My parents hugged us both, told us they were happy for us, that they'd see us soon. Jordan hugged me last, said he was proud of me, that we'd both come a long way. I said yeah, we really had. He and Felix left. Tess and I got in our car, drove to the hotel where we were staying the night before, leaving for our honeymoon the next morning. In the car, Tess asked what I was thinking about. I said everything. The wedding, the past 7 years, how different my life was from what I'd thought it would be. She asked if I was happy with how things turned out. I said yes, absolutely yes. Because I was married to someone I loved. My sister was thriving. My best friend was happy. My relationship with my parents was healing. All because I'd said no when it mattered. Tess said she was glad I'd said no too. Otherwise, we never would have met. She'd started working at my company 2 years after the ultimatum. We'd been paired on a project. Hit it off immediately. I said yeah, the butterfly effect. One choice changing everything. She said it was more than that it was me choosing myself, choosing my own life, instead of letting other people dictate it. That was exactly right. We got to the hotel, checked in, collapsed on the bed still in our wedding clothes, too tired to change. Tess fell asleep almost immediately. I lay there next to her watching her breathe, thinking about the girl I'd been 7 years ago. Sitting in my car outside Jordan's apartment, terrified of making the wrong choice. I'd made the right one. It had cost me things. Time, relationships, peace of mind, but it had also given me things. Freedom, real love, a sister who was strong and independent, a best friend who had his own life. I fell asleep thinking about my dad's text from 7 years ago. The ultimatum, 5 p.m. deadline, the choice that had changed everything. I was grateful I'd said no. Every single day I was grateful. The honeymoon was 2 weeks in Ireland. Tess had always wanted to go. We rented a car and drove around the countryside. Stayed in small bed and breakfasts. Ate too much bread. Took 1,000 photos. One afternoon we were sitting in a pub in Galway. Rain was pouring outside. We'd ordered fish and chips and pints of Guinness. Tess asked if I ever wondered what would have happened if I'd said yes. If I'd married Jordan. I said sometimes. That I thought we would have been miserable. That we would have eventually resented each other. That our friendship wouldn't have survived. She asked if I thought the companies would have been saved. I said maybe. For a while. But Jordan's dad had said the merger would have bought time, not solved the core problems. So probably they would have failed anyway. Just slower. Tess said so everyone would have suffered for longer. I said yeah, basically. She said then I definitely made the right choice. I agreed. We finished our food, waited out the rain, drove to our next stop. A cottage on the coast. We spent 3 days there just reading and walking on the beach and existing together. It was perfect, simple, real. When we got back home, there was a letter waiting from Jordan. Not a text or email, an actual handwritten letter. I opened it on the couch while Tess unpacked. Jordan wrote that he'd been thinking about the ultimatum anniversary, that it had been 7 years, that he wanted me to know how grateful he was that I'd said no. He wrote that marrying me would have ruined both our lives, that we'd made the right choice even though it was hard, that he was happy with Felix and he wanted me to be happy with Tess. He wrote that sometimes he still felt guilty about the employees who lost their jobs, but that he'd learned you can't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm, that we'd both done the best we could. The letter ended with him saying he loved me, as a friend, as a chosen family member, that he'd always have my back no matter what. I folded the letter up, put it in my desk drawer, texted Jordan that I loved him too, that I was grateful for him, that we'd made it through together. He texted back a heart emoji, then a photo of him and Felix making dinner. They looked happy. I showed Tess the letter. She said Jordan was a good person. I said yeah, he really was. Life settled into a rhythm after that. Work, home, family dinners, Sunday visits with Vanessa, monthly coffee with my dad, holidays with both families. It wasn't exciting. It was just life. Normal, regular, everyday life. And it was exactly what I'd wanted when I'd said no 7 years ago. The chance to build something real, something mine, something based on choice. At the 10-year mark, we all gathered again. Same Italian restaurant, same big table, a few new faces. Jordan and Felix had adopted a daughter, Mira. She was 3. Vanessa and Riley were engaged, planning a spring wedding. My parents looked older but healthy, settled. They'd sold their Cleveland apartment and bought a small house near us. They wanted to be close to family. To make up for lost time, Jordan's parents had done the same, moved closer, started babysitting Mira twice a week. They'd become the grandparents they'd always wanted to be. During dinner, my dad stood up, said he wanted to say something. Everyone got quiet. He said 10 years ago he'd made the worst mistake of his life, that he'd tried to force his child into a marriage to save his business, that he'd threatened his other child's well-being to make it happen, that he'd prioritized money and pride over love and family. He said he was grateful every day that I'd been brave enough to say no, that I'd saved him from himself, that the last 10 years had been hard but they'd also been healing, that he'd become a better person because of it. He raised his glass, said he wanted to toast to the courage to say no, to choosing yourself, to building life on your own terms. Everyone raised their glasses, clinked them together, drank. Jordan caught my eye again, like he had 5 years ago. We smiled at each other. We'd made it, really made it. Not just survived, but thrived. After dinner, we all walked to a nearby park, let Mira run around on the playground, sat on benches, talking and laughing. Tess leaned against me, said this was nice. I said yeah, it was. Vanessa wheeled over. Riley was behind her pushing when the path got steep. Vanessa said she'd been looking at wedding venues, asked if I'd help her plan. I said of course, whatever she needed. She said she was thinking small, just family and close friends, maybe a garden ceremony, nothing fancy. Riley said Vanessa wanted to walk down the aisle, not wheel. There was this harness system that could help her stand and take steps with support. She'd been working with a physical therapist. Vanessa said it was important to her, that she wanted to do it on her own 2 feet even if it was just for a few minutes, that it would prove something, to herself, to everyone who'd ever doubted her. I said she didn't have to prove anything, that she was already strong. She said she knew, but she wanted to anyway. I told her I'd be there, front row, crying probably. She laughed, said definitely crying, that I always cried at weddings. We stayed at the park until it got dark. Mira fell asleep on Felix's shoulder. We all headed to our cars, made plans for next month. Same restaurant, same table, same tradition. Driving home, Tess said she loved my family, that even with all the history and complications, they were good people. I said yeah, they'd done the work, become good people again. She asked if I ever regretted saying no, even a little bit. I said never, not once. That saying no had given me everything I had now. Her, Vanessa's independence, Jordan's happiness, real relationships with my parents, a life built on truth instead of obligation. She said good, that she was glad I'd chosen myself, that the world needed more people who could do that. I kissed her at a red light. She kissed back. The light turned green and we drove home. Our apartment was quiet. We'd been talking about buying a house, maybe starting a family. Nothing decided yet, just talking. That night, I lay in bed thinking about the girl I'd been 10 years ago, 24 years old, sitting in her car outside Jordan's apartment building, terrified, desperate, trapped between impossible choices. I wished I could go back and tell her it would be okay, that saying no was the right choice, that it would hurt and be hard, but that she'd survive, more than survive. She'd build something beautiful. But I couldn't go back. None of us could. We could only move forward, taking the lessons we'd learned and trying to do better. I'd learned that love without freedom isn't love, that sacrifice without consent is manipulation, that protecting someone sometimes means letting them struggle, that saying no can be an act of love. These were hard lessons, painful ones, but necessary. I fell asleep thinking about Vanessa's upcoming wedding, about Jordan and Felix's daughter, about the house Tess and I might buy, about the future stretching out ahead of us, all because I'd said no, all because I'd chosen myself when it mattered most. And I'd do it again, 1,000 times over, without hesitation, because some choices define you. And this one had defined me as someone who couldn't be bought, couldn't be manipulated, Couldn't be forced into sacrificing my life for someone else's priorities. It had defined me as free, and that was worth everything.